Hello, this is option 2 because I've got no classes this week. A bit of background on the students. They're all Vietnamese around university age. The functional language is giving advice using if I were you. The pronunciation feature are weak forms and vowel reduction. The main rationale is they don't have these in Vietnamese. They don't reduce any vowels. The main points in this phrase, if I were you, were becomes w. The u isn't really stressed, so it become a u, and I'd becomes I'd. If I were you, I'd go home. If I were you, I'd see a doctor. There's an extra point here in the I'd or I'd. In Vietnamese, they often don't pronounce final consonants. In fact, the consonant D never appears at the end of a word. Consequently, students often miss it out because they don't even hear it. So I'd also be looking for the ad. This ties over to their written work sometimes. Because they don't hear it, they don't say it, they don't write it, and then it becomes a grammatical error. Okay, the drilling. First of all, I think I'd do the classic choral group individually. If I were you, I'd let them repeat this a few times, then give them some sentence endings. If I were you, I'd see a doctor. If I were you, I'd go home. You've got some word collocations and chunking here. See a doctor. Go home. The second part, I would do a substitution drill. Give students sentence halves. Give some of them problems. I've got a headache. I'm tired. Give other students solutions. So one would shout out, I'm tired. The person with the correct solution would shout, if I were you, I'd go home. I've got a headache. If I were you, I'd take a tablet or see a doctor. Swap these around a few times, see how it goes. The second point would be giving advice like, why don't you? The pronunciation point here is sentence stress. Again, Vietnamese is tonal, so you don't stress words. You don't stress words in sentences. If you do, you'll probably change the meaning completely. We could use the same activity, where we've got sentence halves, but the answer would be different. Why don't you? The main stress is here on the why and the verb that follows the you. Why don't you go home? Why don't you go to the cinema? Why don't you see a doctor? I probably wouldn't worry about the weak form of the you too much here. I think the first bit of drilling could be choral individual. Then let them mumble to themselves individually for practice. And finally, I do it with whispers. Why don't you see a doctor? Kelly and Underhill both talk about this, how we produce stress by making word louder, longer, or changing the pitch. Underhill goes on to talk about how it sounds more articulated, with the stress, why, go home, and stronger mouth movements. By making them whisper, you take away the loudness element of it, so you've really got to concentrate on the other features. You can't just make a word louder to give stress. Thank you.